We were in the middle of our baby shower when everything shattered. The backyard was full of laughter. Pink and blue balloons floated in the air. Someone was recording on their phone. The cake knife was already in my hand. My pregnant wife was smiling, and that smile is something I'll never forget, because seconds later, bang, a gunshot ripped through the air. People screamed. Kids dropped to the ground. My wife collapsed, clutching her stomach. I didn't know if my unborn child was still alive. As chaos exploded around us, I looked up, expecting to see a criminal, a stranger, someone dangerous. But the woman holding the gun wasn't a criminal. She wasn't a random attacker. She was our HOA president, the same woman who had been complaining about parking noise and rules. A Karen. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a baby shower anymore. It was a nightmare we would never escape. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to pause for just a moment, because this story didn't just change our lives. It could happen to anyone watching this right now. So, first, let me ask you something. Which city are you watching this video from? Drop your city name in the comments below. Whether you're in New York, Texas, California, Florida, or somewhere else in the world, I want to know where you're listening from. Stories like this don't just belong to one neighborhood, one state, or one HOA. They happen everywhere. And that's why it's important to talk about them. If you're new here, this channel is all about real-life stories that sound unbelievable, but are completely true. Stories about power, control, fear, and the moments that change people forever. So before we continue, take 1 second and hit the subscribe button. Not later, not after the video, right now. Because once you hear what happened next, you'll understand why these stories matter. What you're about to hear isn't exaggerated. It's not scripted, and it's not a movie scene. This happened in real life. It started as a simple celebration, a baby shower for our first child, a moment that was supposed to be full of love, laughter, and hope. But instead, it turned into a scene involving police sirens, handcuffs, and a gun drawn in front of a pregnant woman. This story is about how quickly joy can turn into fear, how authority can turn into obsession, and how one person's ego nearly destroyed an innocent family. So take a deep breath, because now that you're here, it's time to hear exactly how our baby shower turned into a crime scene. The morning of the baby shower felt different in the best possible way. I woke up earlier than usual, with that nervous excitement sitting heavy in my chest, the kind that doesn't let you fall back asleep. I stepped outside into the backyard while the sun was still low, just starting to light up the fence line, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives. It was our first child, 7 months in. Every kick, every ultrasound, every late-night conversation had led to this moment. My wife came outside slowly, one hand on her belly, the other holding a mug of tea. She smiled at me, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen much since the pregnancy exhaustion had taken over. "Today's the day," she said softly. I nodded. Today's the day. By mid-morning, the backyard had transformed. Pink and blue balloons were tied along the fence. A long table was covered with pastel tablecloths, gift bags, and tiny baby clothes folded with care. Someone had brought a speaker, playing soft music, nothing loud, nothing disruptive. Just enough to create warmth. Family began arriving first. My parents, her sister, a few close friends. People hugged, laughed, took photos. Phones were out constantly, capturing moments we didn't even realize would soon become painful to look back on. My wife sat in a chair near the center of it all, glowing in that way only pregnant women do. People touched her belly, joked about baby names, shared stories about sleepless nights and diapers. For a while, I forgot about everything else. I forgot about work stress. I forgot about bills. I forgot about the HOA emails. Yes, the HOA. We lived in a neighborhood where rules mattered more than people, where grass height was measured with a ruler, where trash cans couldn't be out 5 minutes too early, where one woman in particular took her role very seriously. Her name was Karen. Officially, she was the HOA president. Unofficially, she was the neighborhood enforcer. The kind of person who treated authority like a personality trait. We had crossed paths before. Parking warnings, noise complaints, a note once left on our door because a guest parked slightly over the line. Nothing major, just constant reminders that we were being watched. But that morning, I didn't think about her. I wish I had. Around noon, the yard was full. Laughter bounced off the fence. Kids ran around chasing bubbles. Someone started setting up the cake, a simple white cake with pastel frosting and tiny baby footprints on top. I picked up the knife, joking, "All right, who's ready?" That's when everything shifted. It wasn't loud at first, just the sound of the gate opening, metal creaking, then footsteps, sharp, deliberate, high heels clicking against concrete. I felt it before I saw it, that sudden tension like when a room goes quiet without anyone saying a word. People turned their heads. And there she was. Karen stood just inside the gate, sunglasses on, clipboard pressed against her chest. Perfect posture, neutral expression, not smiling, not frowning, observing. The music kept playing, but it suddenly felt too loud, too obvious. She took a slow step forward, scanning the yard, the decorations, the guests, the cars parked along the street outside the fence. No greeting. No congratulations, just a sharp inhale. Who approved this gathering? Her voice cut through the air. Conversation stopped. A child froze mid-run. I stepped forward instinctively, trying to stay calm. "Hi," I said. "It's just a baby shower. Family and friends." She looked at me like I'd said something offensive. "Is this a permitted event?" she asked. I blinked. "It's a private party. In our backyard." She adjusted her clipboard and began flipping through papers she didn't need to flip through. "You're violating HOA regulations," she said. "Unauthorized gathering. Noise disturbance. Improper street parking." I glanced around. The music was low. Cars were parked legally. No one was blocking driveways. My mother stepped in gently. "It's only for a few hours." Karen turned toward her slowly. "Rules apply to everyone," she said flatly. Then her eyes moved to my wife. My pregnant wife, sitting there, hands folded over her belly, watching quietly. Karen didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't acknowledge the pregnancy at all. Instead, she said, "This needs to end." A murmur spread through the guests. I felt my chest tighten. "Please," I said, "this is important to us." Karen finally smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was thin, controlled. "You people always think exceptions apply to you." That sentence landed like a slap. I saw my wife's face fall, the joy drain out of her eyes. The excitement we'd been building for weeks deflate in seconds. Karen checked her watch. "You have 10 minutes, she said. "After that, I escalate." 10 minutes. For a baby shower. She turned and walked toward the street, heels clicking again, already pulling her phone out. Guests stood there awkwardly, unsure what to do. Some apologized. Some started gathering their things. Someone turned off the music. My wife wiped her eyes quickly, trying not to cry. And standing there, watching the happiest day of our lives unravel, I told myself one thing. At least she's leaving. At least this is over. I had no idea that what came next would turn this celebration into the most terrifying day of our lives. For a few seconds after Karen walked away, no one spoke. It was as if the entire backyard had been placed on pause. The music was off. The balloons still floated, but they now looked ridiculous. Bright decorations hanging over a moment that had suddenly turned heavy and uncomfortable. I forced a smile and turned to our guests. "It's fine," I said. "Let's just calm things down." But the damage was already done. People began whispering to one another, checking their phones, glancing toward the gate as if they expected Karen to come back at any moment. A few guests quietly apologized and started packing up their gifts. My wife sat frozen in her chair, staring at the ground. One hand rested on her belly, the other gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. I knelt beside her. "Hey," I said softly. "It's okay. She's gone." She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "I just wanted one normal day," she whispered. That sentence broke something inside me. I stood up, determined not to let this end the celebration. I asked a friend to turn the music back on, but quieter. I tried to restart conversations, offered cake, made jokes that didn't land. People smiled politely, but everyone was tense. 5 minutes passed, then 7. Then I heard it. A car door slam. My stomach dropped. I walked toward the fence and peeked through the slats. Karen's car was still parked down the street. She hadn't left. She was standing beside it, phone pressed to her ear, pointing toward our house. Taking pictures, writing something down. I felt anger rise in my chest, mixed with disbelief. Was she really calling someone? Over a baby shower? I walked back toward the yard, trying to keep my voice steady. She's still outside, I told a few people quietly. The mood shifted again. More guests started leaving. I don't want trouble, one neighbor said. I'm sorry, another whispered. My wife watched people go, tears slipping down her face now. No more holding them back. Her sister sat beside her, rubbing her shoulder. Let's just end it, my wife said. Please. That was when I realized Karen had already won. She hadn't needed to yell. She hadn't needed to threaten. Her presence alone was enough to destroy the moment. As the yard emptied, Karen finally moved again. She walked back through the gate. Slowly, confidently. She looked around and nodded, as if approving her own work. This should have been handled properly from the beginning, she said. I clenched my jaw. The party's ending. You got what you wanted. She raised an eyebrow. I don't think you understand. She pulled out her clipboard and began reading. I'm issuing formal violations, she said. Fines will be mailed. Further action may be taken. For what? I snapped. People are leaving. She ignored me and continued writing. Then she looked up and said something that sent a chill through me. Some people only learn when consequences are enforced. Her eyes flicked to my wife again. I stepped between them. Do not look at her. Karen laughed softly. Oh, relax, she said. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. My wife was pregnant, crying, humiliated in front of her family. And Karen thought we were being dramatic. She checked her watch again. I gave you 10 minutes, she said. And I'm still seeing violations. That's because you never intended to leave, I said. For the first time, her smile disappeared. Careful, she said. You're bordering on harassment. The irony was so heavy it felt unreal. Karen turned and walked back toward her car. Again, and again we assumed she was done. I hugged my wife tightly. It's over, I said. I promise. She leaned into me, exhausted, emotionally drained. But then someone screamed from the front yard. She's coming back. I looked up just in time to see Karen stepping through the gate once more. This time, her hands were buried deep inside her purse. Her face was different. Not smug, not annoyed, focused, cold. Every instinct in my body told me something was wrong. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Karen stopped a few feet away from us. The backyard was almost empty now. Just close family. A few neighbors watching from their windows. She reached into her purse, slowly, deliberately, and pulled something out. At first, my mind refused to accept it. Then the sunlight caught the metal. A gun. Time seemed to slow down. My wife gasped. Someone yelled, "Is that real?" Karen raised her voice. This ends now. I stepped in front of my wife without thinking. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer about rules. This was about control, and it was about to turn deadly. The second I saw the gun, my body reacted before my brain did. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard it hurt. My hands went numb. Every sound around me seemed to stretch and distort, like I was underwater. I remember thinking, this can't be real. Not here. Not today. Not at a baby shower. Karen stood there with the gun in her hand, her arms stiff, her posture perfect, as if she were holding another clipboard, not a weapon that could end lives in seconds. No one needs to get hurt, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. She didn't answer. My wife clutched my shirt from behind, her fingers trembling. I could feel her breathing speed up, each breath shallow and panicked. Someone behind us whispered, "Call 911. Another voice said, "Put the phone down, don't make her mad." People didn't know whether to run or freeze. Some dropped to the ground. Others backed away, slowly, hands raised, afraid that any sudden movement would set her off. Karen's eyes scanned the yard. She wasn't panicking. She was evaluating. "This is what happens when rules are ignored," she said loudly. "You push people too far." Her finger rested near the trigger. I raised my hand slightly, trying to look non-threatening. "Karen, please. This isn't necessary." She laughed, a sharp, hollow laugh that didn't match the moment. "You're still not listening," she said. "This ends when I say it ends." My wife let out a sob. That sound, raw and desperate, echoed through the yard, and something inside Karen snapped. She raised the gun, not directly at anyone, at the sky. Time stopped. I remember thinking about our unborn child, about names we had argued over, about the nursery that still smelled like fresh paint, about the future we might never get to have. Then, bang, the sound exploded through the neighborhood. Birds scattered from the trees. Car alarms went off. A shockwave ripped through my chest. My wife screamed. Her body went limp against me, and we both fell to the ground. For one horrifying second, I thought she had been shot. I screamed her name, my voice breaking as I pressed my hands against her stomach, terrified I would feel blood. "I can't feel the baby," she cried. People were running now. Not walking, not backing away, running. Someone knocked over the table. Gift spilled onto grass. The cake crashed to the ground, frosting smeared into the dirt. Kids were crying. Adults were shouting. Chaos swallowed the yard. Karen stood there, gun still raised, eyes wide now, not with regret, but with adrenaline. "I warned you," she shouted. I pulled my wife closer, shielding her with my body. "Someone help." I yelled. Neighbors poured out of their houses. Phones were held up, recording, dialing shaking. I heard sirens in the distance. Karen finally seemed to realize what she had done. Her breathing became erratic. Her hands started to shake. She lowered the gun slightly. And then, police cars screeched to a stop in front of the house. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon," one of them shouted. Karen froze. For a moment, I thought she might raise the gun again. Instead, she let it fall. The metal hit the concrete with a loud clatter. Officers rushed her, forcing her to the ground. One officer pinned her arms behind her back, while another snapped handcuffs onto her wrists. Karen screamed. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. "I run this neighborhood." An officer replied calmly, "Not anymore." Paramedics rushed toward us. They lifted my wife onto a stretcher. She was shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared," she kept repeating. "I'm scared." I climbed into the ambulance with her, holding her hand as they checked her vitals, her stomach, the baby's heartbeat. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, the paramedic looked at us and said the words I will never forget. "The baby's heartbeat is strong." I broke down. I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Outside, Karen was being led to a police car, still shouting, still insisting she was in the right. I watched through the ambulance doors as they shut her inside. The woman who had destroyed our baby shower. The woman who fired a gun in front of a pregnant mother. The woman who thought power made her untouchable. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. This wasn't an accident. This was who she really was. And our nightmare wasn't over yet. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sealing us inside a space that smelled like antiseptic and fear. The siren wailed as we pulled away from the house, the sound slicing through my head over and over again. My wife lay strapped to the stretcher, her face pale, her hands gripping the sides as if she were holding on to reality itself. "I can't stop shaking," she whispered. I held her hand, even though mine were trembling just as badly. My clothes were still dusty from the ground. Somewhere in the chaos, I had lost my phone. None of that mattered. All that mattered was the tiny heartbeat echoing from the monitor beside her. The paramedic spoke calmly, asking questions, shining a light into her eyes, checking her blood pressure. But I could barely hear him. My thoughts kept replaying the sound of the gunshot. Sharp, violent, final. Every time the ambulance hit a bump, my wife flinched. At the hospital, doors flew open and nurses rushed toward us. My wife was wheeled away, and for the first time since the gun went off, I wasn't allowed to follow. "You need to wait here," a nurse said firmly. The doors closed, and I was alone. I sank into a plastic chair in the hallway, my knees weak. Around me, people walked by carrying coffee cups, chatting quietly, living normal lives, and I wanted to scream at them. Didn't they know what had just happened? A police officer approached me, notebook in hand. "I need you to tell me exactly what you saw," he said. So I did. I told him about the clipboard, the warnings, the 10 minutes, the gun. Saying it out loud made it feel unreal, like I was describing a movie scene instead of my own life. "Did she point the weapon at anyone?" the officer asked. "She didn't have to," I replied. "She fired it." He nodded slowly. Another officer joined us. Then another. They asked about Karen's name, her role in the HOA, past interactions. I told them everything. That's when one of the officers said something that made my stomach twist. "You're not the first to report her." Apparently, other neighbors had complained before. Threats, harassment, aggressive behavior. But nothing had ever escalated like this. Until today. Hours passed. I stared at the wall, counting tiles, praying silently. Finally, a doctor came out. "She's stable," he said, "and the baby is okay." I collapsed forward, covering my face. Relief hit me so hard it hurt. When I finally saw my wife again, she looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had aged years in a single afternoon. "I keep hearing it," she said quietly. "The sound." I knew exactly what she meant. That night, neither of us slept. Machines beeped softly. Nurses came and went. Every sudden noise made my wife jump. Every time someone opened the door, her heart rate spiked. Sometime around 3 a.m., she asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. Why did she hate us so much? I didn't have an answer. The next morning, the police returned. Karen had been formally charged. Assault with a deadly weapon. Illegal discharge of a firearm. Endangering a pregnant woman. The officer said she had tried to justify her actions. She claimed she felt threatened by the gathering. I laughed bitterly. Threatened by balloons. By cake. By a baby shower. The officer didn't smile. She also kept saying she was just enforcing rules. Rules. That word felt poison now. Later that day, I went back to the house to collect some things. The yard looked unrecognizable. Balloons deflated. Cake smeared into the grass. Police tape fluttering in the wind. Neighbors stood in small groups, whispering. Some avoided eye contact. Some apologized. Some hugged me without saying a word. One neighbor pulled me aside. "She's been like this for years," he said quietly. "We were all scared of her." That sentence stayed with me. Everyone knew. Everyone was afraid. And no one stopped her. That night, back at home, neither of us could bring ourselves to sleep in the bedroom. My wife sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Every sound outside made her flinch. A car door, footsteps, a distant siren. I realized then that the damage wasn't just emotional. It was permanent. The joy we had felt about becoming parents had been replaced with fear. The place we called home no longer felt safe. And deep down, I knew something else too. The gunshot wasn't the end of this story. It was only the beginning of what we would have to fight next. The days after the shooting blurred together. Every morning, I woke up exhausted, even after hours of lying awake. Sleep didn't come easily anymore, not for me, and definitely not for my wife. Every time she closed her eyes, the sound of the gunshot came back. Sharp, sudden, violent. We attended follow-up hospital visits in silence. Doctors assured us again and again that the baby was healthy, that the stress hadn't caused physical harm. But no doctor could treat fear. Then came the court dates. The first time we walked into the courthouse, my wife squeezed my hand so tightly I thought my fingers would go numb. The building felt cold and heavy, like it was designed to crush hope instead of protect it. Karen sat at the defense table. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no confidence. She wore a plain outfit and kept her head down, but I could still feel her presence. The same controlling energy. The same refusal to accept responsibility. When the judge entered, the room stood. Karen stood, too, slowly, stiffly, as if she were offended by the act. The prosecutor laid out the charges: illegal possession of a firearm, reckless endangerment, assault with a deadly weapon, emotional distress inflicted on a pregnant woman. Hearing the words out loud made my chest tighten. This wasn't just something that happened anymore. It was on record. Witnesses were called. Neighbors described what they saw: the warning, the shouting, the gun. One by one, people spoke. People who had been afraid of Karen for years, but had never said anything before. A police officer testified about the weapon. It wasn't registered. It wasn't legal. Karen's attorney tried to paint her as a dedicated community leader who lost control in a stressful situation. I felt my jaw clench. Dedicated? She had terrorized an entire neighborhood. When my wife was asked to testify, I wanted to stand up and say no. I wanted to protect her from reliving it. But she stood anyway. Her voice shook at first, but then it steadied. She talked about the baby shower, the joy, the humiliation, the gunshot. She placed a hand on her stomach and said something that silenced the courtroom. I thought I was about to lose my child. Karen didn't look up. The judge did. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she finally raised her head. I was enforcing the rules, she said. I felt disrespected. Disrespected. Not remorseful. Not apologetic. Just offended. The judge leaned forward. HOA authority, he said, is not permission to terrorize residents. The sentence came down. Karen was taken into custody. She was banned from ever holding a position in an HOA again. The power she clung to so tightly was stripped away in minutes. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Neighbors watched silently. My wife leaned into me, exhausted. Is it over? She asked. I wanted to say yes. But trauma doesn't end with a verdict. In the weeks that followed, Karen's name disappeared from HOA emails. New leadership was installed. Rules were rewritten. But for us, the damage remained. My wife struggled with anxiety. Sudden noises made her jump. She refused to sit near windows. She checked locks multiple times before sleeping. I watched the woman I loved turn into someone constantly bracing for danger. One night, she said quietly, I don't feel safe here anymore. She was right. No amount of justice could undo what had happened. So, we made a decision. We would leave, not because we lost, but because survival sometimes means starting over. We packed up the nursery we had barely used, folded baby clothes we once smiled at, closed a door we never wanted to walk through. The day we moved out, I looked back at the house, the place where we had planned a future, the place where fear replaced joy, and I understood something painful but important. Justice can punish a person, but healing takes much longer. And for us, that journey was only beginning. We didn't just move to a new house. We moved away from a version of ourselves that no longer existed. The first night in our new place, everything felt unfamiliar. The walls were bare. Boxes lined the floor. The air smelled different. There were no memories yet, and somehow that felt safer. My wife sat on the bed, one hand on her stomach, the other resting on mine. Do you think we'll ever feel normal again? She asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I didn't know. Trauma doesn't announce when it leaves. It lingers quietly. It hides in everyday moments. A door slamming too hard. Fireworks in the distance. Someone raising their voice unexpectedly. Our baby arrived a few weeks later. The delivery room was calm. Controlled. Safe. When I held my child for the first time, I felt something crack open inside my chest, a mix of overwhelming love and a deep, aching fear of the world. I promised myself right then, no one would ever make my family feel powerless again. My wife went to therapy, so did I. We learned that survival doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like shaking hands, missed sleep, and the courage to talk about what hurts. She still jumps at loud noises. I still scan rooms when we enter them. But we're learning. Slowly. We stopped blaming ourselves. We stopped asking, what if? We stopped replaying the moment, frame by frame, trying to change an ending that already happened. Instead, we focused on what we could control. Our home, our boundaries, our voices. we learn something that no HOA handbook ever teaches. Authority without accountability is dangerous. Power, when mixed with ego, can turn ordinary people into threats. And silence is what allows it to grow. Looking back, what hurts the most isn't just the gunshot. It's knowing that people were afraid of her for years. They whispered, they warned each other privately, but no one spoke loudly enough. Until it was almost too late. If you're watching this and thinking, this could never happen to me, that's exactly what we thought too. This story isn't just about an HOA president. It's about unchecked power in any form. At work, in neighborhoods, in everyday life. If someone uses authority to intimidate, control, or humiliate, that's a warning sign. Don't ignore it. Document everything. Know your rights. Speak up early. Because waiting can cost more than comfort. It can cost safety. Our child will grow up never knowing that their first celebration ended in fear. And that's how it should be. But we'll never forget. We carry the lesson forward, not as anger, but as awareness. And if telling this story prevents even one family from experiencing what we did, then it was worth telling. If the story made you feel something, fear, anger, sadness, or understanding. Backhand index pointing right, like this video to help it reach more people. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe for real-life stories that need to be heard. Backhand index pointing right, and comment justice served if you believe accountability matters. Also, tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with someone who abused power? Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone. Because silence protects the wrong people, and speaking up can save lives.